Good afternoon and welcome to the 849 Governance Committee. Only 5 minutes late after a marathon planning committee meeting. Thank you, Chair Councillor Hamill, for getting us through it. So we'll start today by there are no apologies or leaves of absence. Would someone move the confirmation of minutes? Councillor Martin, seconded Councillor O'Neill. All in favour? Thank you. I haven't received any conflict of interest declarations. Now, start items. Are there any items that anyone wishes to unstar? I'm happy to star 6.2 unless anyone would like to consider the policy review. Okay, so we'll star that one as well. Okay, so I move that start items 5.1, 6.2, 6.3 and 7.1 be accepted. Seconder, Councillor Taylor. All in favour? Great, thank you. So we'll go to...
7.1 is not starred.
It's not starred? It is on my document. It's all right. Okay. Rightio. So 6.1. Page 15. So this is regarding the response to the petition on the cashless customer service centres, facilities and venues. So if we could have a brief presentation, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. At its ordinary meeting on the 19th of July this year, Council received a petition requesting the reinstatement of cash payments at all Council facilities. My report and presentation today will take you through the background in relation to the City's move to cashless payments and the matters that we've taken into consideration in forming the recommendation presented in the report today. Just by way of background, over time there's been several factors leading into the decision to adopt a cashless payments. In 2007, nationally there's been a move away from cash as a preferred method of payment by consumers. In 2007, a cash accounted around for about 70% of payments and decreased down to 27% in 2019. At the City, our cash payments represented 0.3% of all payments in 2019. In response to the COVID health crisis in March 2020, all City venues, libraries and customer service centres adopted contactless payment methods to reduce the risk of staff and customers contracting COVID. The recommendation to move to contactless payments permanently for customer service centres was presented to Council as part of the review for service channels and adopted in September 2020. Major sports venues, aquatics, libraries and waste continued to not accept cash as a payment method. The decline of cash nationally continues in Australia, with the RBA reporting in 2022 that only 13% of payments are made with cash. The reinstatement of cash requires several considerations, including our customers and the way that they pay, operational matters including risks to service, work health, safety and security, and the risk of fraud and error, financial, considering value for money and costs associated with our fit-outs and recurrent expenditure, and then also legal, so consideration of legal tender and the acceptance of cash, and any limitation to human rights as a result of not accepting cash. So this graph here represents how our customers pay. The blue bar represents the 23-24 financial year, and the orange bar represents 17-18 financial year. So BPay is our customers' preferred method of payment. 69% of the City receipts in 23-24 were through BPay. We're seeing that the customers are leaning towards the surcharge-free methods of payment, which are predominantly through our direct debit and BPay. The table to the right summarises the change in percentage points since 2017. So BPay has increased by 18.1 percentage points and direct debits by 4.2 percentage points. Customers are starting to move away from cheques, credit card and even Australia Post, where cash is accepted as an option for payment. This graph here is from the Australian Banking Association and is based on RBA data published in 2023. Nationally, the use of cash has dropped by 57 percentage points since 2007, so it's down from 70% down to 13%. Consumers are using direct debit and credit card and other methods such as buy now and pay later and digital wallet to make payments. Other relevant statistics include that the average Australian adult has 2.2 debit cards or 1.3 credit cards. There are 45.6 debit cards on issue in Australia, with a current Australian adult population of 21.3 million. From an operational perspective, considerations being given to service risks, including telecommunication outage, storm events and electricity outages. Work health safety and security risk have also been considered, including the enhanced need for security, minimising public contact for health reasons, the additional requirements around managing the risk of fraud or error when accepting and storing cash. From a financial perspective, we've considered the fit-out costs and the recurrent costs. So fit-out costs for all city venues and services for cash acceptance would cost around about $2.3 million. The recurrent costs annually would be around about $850,000 per annum. This incorporates the management and maintenance of cash flows, reconciliations, counting, discrepancy management, and also cash collections by our contractor. The costs, the fit out and the recurrent costs will need to be factored in when we are looking at setting fees and charges for our next financial year. And legal considerations. So the acceptance of cash. Although cash is legal tender, businesses can choose the way they accept payments, provided that they are clear and upfront with customers. We do this by providing signage at our venues, but also by providing notice on our website and on our rates and water charges notices. As part of this review, we've also considered human rights. The details are included in my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Karen. On the recurring costs, I wonder if you could go back a couple of slides where it talks about I think it's the 600K annually. Is that, that's a float essentially, it's not a hard cost. Is this distributing floats and therefore it's not an expense, or this is an actual expense?
Through the chair, no, this is actual expense, predominantly a labour expense. When there's a shift change, there'll be a requirement to count a float. There will also be requirements to investigate discrepancies, which obviously comes with the time. There will also be training requirements for staff on cash handling. So it's predominantly labour costs.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just follow on from that, obviously aquatic centres, I think we discussed it with city officers, but the unique element of aquatic centres is we have some centres that are city owned but privately managed or by an operator, and just seeking confirmation. So some of those facilities, correct me if I'm wrong, they are still accepting cash?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct, councillor. There are our managed aquatic centres that do accept cash payment for entry into the venue.
So how many city-owned, say, aquatic centres are operating as cashless at the moment? Is it the 3?
It'll be the 4, so the Palm Beach Aquatic Centre, Pimpama, Gold Coast Aquatic Centre and Miami.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Karen. On page 19, we cover off on the financial considerations in which we're presented with the requirements for each site with regards to retrofitting or returning the cash handling activities. And it says that, so it says that to ensure this, as a minimum, to ensure the safety of city staff, each location, and then it lists what it would need, and it includes cash safes, cash counting rooms, and position of CCTV, and then the installation of glass partitions for customer service centres. My question is, that requirement something that is externally required, or like is it something that we decide we need for best practice?
Through the chair, councillor, so to ensure that we've got the appropriate internal controls around the managing of risk for cash, because it's a highly susceptible item for misappropriation, so for the protection of staff and also for the city of loss of cash, these requirements are needed to be put in place.
Thanks, Chair. And they, even if we predict that only like 0.5% of transactions, so a very low amount of cash would be going through a particular facility, we would still require that level of facilities to support cash handling, even for minimal amount of cash.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. Any loss of cash is a reportable incident to the QAO, particularly if there's any indication that it is loss or theft from staff.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. So in the report, it talks to Australia Post and Commonwealth Bank. So we do take cash, obviously, through those areas. I suppose for me it's indicating 55, but from our aquatic centres or council facilities, how far away would most of these Commonwealth Banks or Australia Post be from a facility? So we're here at Hotter. I know there's Australia Post across the road, and in Chevron. How far would someone have to go from a local venue?
Yeah, through the chair. I did actually have a map of all of the locations across the city of Gold Coast. It wasn't in this version of the presentation that I've got loaded today, but I'm happy to distribute it. To the north of the Gold Coast, from memory, it is quite dispersed, but once we sort of get down into the more populated areas along the coastline, there's quite a few Australia Posts and CBAs.
Thank you. No, because I did get both the maps up, and it did show that obviously through the Central Coast, it seems to be a lot more locations. I think the northern and southern on the map showed least amount of opportunity, but I was just interested in those areas. How would they get serviced?
I've just got a follow-up question on that. So I'm not sure whether you're aware that in the last 2 years, CBA's moved out of Southport CBD, and Australia Post has closed down their shop at Australia Fair. That's had a significant impact on residents in the CBD. Is there any capacity, given the dependence we have on CBA and Australia Post to provide this service, for us to engage with them, to request that if they are considering changes, that we at least get to provide our proposal? For example, Australia Post, they took numbers based on when it was undergoing renovation, so there weren't as many numbers going through, and they made the decision without any input. So is there a way we could formalise that?
Through the chair, I'll have to take that question on notice.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for the presentation and for the detail in the reports we've received. Just out of curiosity, when we did convert over to our cashless, the permanency of cashlessness in 2020, has the city got a statistic or some data around how many formal complaints have been received in that respect of this transition? And if so, any numbers that you can provide to say we've received X amount of complaints?
Through the chair. So I don't have any actual numbers, but just feedback from Service Gold Coast in relation to how many or what was the incident of customers complaining. Initially there was a bit, but remembering as well we were coming off the back of COVID, so most customers were already attuned to paying with card rather than cash, but that's not to say that there wasn't complaints that did come through.
Councillor Curtis?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to confirm the petition premise, as outlined on the first page of the report. It only gives us sort of one sentence of the petition. Is that the petition in its entirety, or was there further detail within the petition of what their
Through the
concern was?
Chair, that was the petition in its entirety.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. Do we advertise the locations through Commonwealth Banks and Post Office if someone wants to know where they can pay by cash? So my understanding is we do accept it through those organisations. Do we indicate where those locations are?
Through the Chair, I'll have to take that question on notice unless the Chief Customer Officer is aware of whether we do that.
Cool. Thank you for the question. So through the Chair, I guess where there's electronic mediums, I guess we provide linkages out to those sources. We wouldn't choose to maintain that repository ourselves. We would choose to link to the appropriate source of that data so customers can find where those locations are. I guess we don't produce that on anything that would be hard written as such. Yeah.
Councillor Fowler, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. My question was just in relation to HOTA. Obviously, I understand that sits outside of Experience Gold Coast, but is there any consideration in this report to HOTA being cashless? And I guess as councillors, do we have any, sort of numbers on what impact that would have for the entity?
Through the Chair, yes, Councillor, I've spoken to the CEO of HOTA just to get an idea around numbers in relation to cash transactions that were at HOTA before they went cashless in 2023. So they were recording numbers of around 6% of transactions that were in cash. Their operational costs exceeded the amount of revenue they were bringing in via the cash method. So that decision was made by the board to remove away from cashless payments.
Councillor Martin?
Thanks, Chair. So HOTA's decision in 2023 was more around efficiency and their business model, whereas, so correct me if I'm wrong, the council decision is very much around COVID and spread, but it wasn't sort of operational efficiency wasn't really contemplated. It was more around that it's a low percentage because of the safety concerns. That's why we implemented it. Of that previous resolution, was there ever a commitment to reinstate it or review it, or was it perhaps once that COVID threat was gone, it would just naturally resume?
I'll speak on that first. So with that resolution in council in COVID, it was COVID based, but then after COVID, once it had been in, then that's when a further recommendation came back that we just keep it in place. So it probably wouldn't have come to us if we hadn't had that COVID thing, but that's...
Through the Chair, Councillor, just to answer your question around the efficiencies and the resolution that came to Council. So as part of the holistic review of customer service channels, there was some information that was brought to Council in that report around the efficiencies gained, and that was predominantly in relation to the labour costs and then also the cost per transaction of accepting cash at the customer service venues.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just out of curiosity, do we have any data since, again, going back to 2020 when we made these permanent changes, do we have any data around the actual savings this has produce for ratepayers from taking the efficiency measures of going to the system that we've currently got in place? Do we have any data for that by any chance?
Through the chair, so the data would be on the same basis that I've built the estimated recurrent costs on. So this was based on how much time it costs in labour to do the reconciliations, do the float changes, do the discrepancy reviews, and all of those factors that come to play when managing cash at venues and locations.
I think it's probably worth answering there. My understanding is those efficiencies. Your question was it a saving to ratepayers? Not if it's a saving to the city. My understanding is those savings haven't been passed back in reduced fees in those things, in those areas. So it's a saving to the city, not necessarily to those ratepayers that would be using them at those facilities. Do you have a follow-up question?
Would be savings would go to general.
Yeah, but that wasn't what the question was about. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Chair, what you're saying there, but I also agree with Councillor Gates on that. And so we're just shy of, say, just under $4 million, basically, if I'm going off of the numbers on the screen here roughly. But I'm sure there would be other considerations around upkeep of various pieces of equipment and stuff that may have also been not factored necessarily into that as well. So, but no, I appreciate you answering that. Thanks.
Through the chair, so yeah, you're correct. So things like software upgrades for the point of sale systems. The point of sale systems are configured to accept card payments at the moment, not necessarily for cash payments. There'll be a requirement to reinstall cash tills at the registers, which are no longer there, and particularly not at the newer venues as well. And there will also be the cost to fill the floats with some physical cash itself.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you very much. Do we have any information about when that keeping cash transactions bill might be considered?
Through the chair, yes, I've had a look at that. It's still sitting, being considered, and there's no indication as to when it will progress from being read.
Because I guess that, depending on the outcome of that, we may be compelled to do something. And I think it would be, personally, I'm not on this committee, so I won't be involved in making a change recommendation or a vote, but it would seem to make sense to me that we do nothing until the results of that bill that the government is currently considering.
Any other questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Just on that legislation around business, you had I wonder if you could put it up on screen. Just around businesses being able to determine legal tender and refusing cash. Just making sure that local government would be considered business, or is there perhaps a higher level that we are held to as a local government, not essentially, acting as a business? I'm just wondering if we've got coverage here to act like a business.
We're a big business.
Yeah, it's a big business.
Yeah, through the chair, yes. So I've had legal review this particular situation and whether we do fall within this, and yes, we do.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for that presentation. I have a changed recommendation I wish to move. And if I have a seconder, Councillor Martin. So one thing that wasn't stipulated in the report, page 20, but I did get further detail, and Karen, you may be able to speak to it, is when I requested further detail on the split between major sports venues and aquatics, turned out that the actual expense of doing this in aquatic centres is not that prohibitive. It really is in other areas, and I know the petitioners would like to see cash across all services within the city. However, I just think I support Councillor Gates' idea that we really cannot do that. We can't justify the cost to ratepayers unless we're obligated to by federal legislation. However, on aquatic centres, there currently is an imbalance because some of our aquatic centres do accept cash, some don't accept cash, and when we've separated that from the major sports venues, the cost for us to do it is not prohibitive. And I would suggest that the fit-out costs are probably very, very generous, given that we're talking about a CCTV camera and a safe, and it's been deemed that would take $150,000 potentially to do that. So this recommendation, although it won't be,
just about the claim you just made, is the $150,000 you're saying across all of the council aquatic centres, or just one?
It is proposed that it will be $150,000 per centre to put in a CCTV camera and a safe. So if that is the case,
and the other cash handling elements that we're required to do for workplace health and safety, is that what you mean?
so cash safe, cash counting rooms, positioning of CCTV, installation of glass partitions, which are already there, installation of cash drawers. So they are the things. So it's effectively a cash safe and a CCTV.
And $150 per venue.
$150 per venue is what's proposed. So I would be pretty happy to get that contract, I think. So I will continue with this, but before I do, I'll answer questions. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Fowler, sorry.
Oh, was it Taylor or Fowler? Sorry, it was you.
Sorry. Could I just, how many aquatic centres do we have at the moment? How many would we have to upgrade, or how many is currently using cash, and what would that amount be? Or do we have an exact amount?
Yeah, through the chair. So there's 4 aquatic centres that the city manages. So 2 new ones being Pimpama and Palm Beach, which never have been fitted out to accept cash. Gold Coast Aquatic Centre and Miami are different because they've been around a bit longer. So the cost to fit out Pimpama and Palm Beach will be a lot more than what it would be to fit out Gold Coast Aquatic Centre. So that's why the figure is an estimate and a roundabout, because the full review would need to be undertaken to determine the cost per location.
Sorry, so how many are we saying totally on the Gold Coast aquatic centres? We're talking aquatic centres. How many aquatic centres do we have on the Gold Coast? How many take cash now, and how many would need fitting out? And what I'm hearing is obviously there's 2 types, a new one that may need more investment than an older type.
Through the chair, I'll have to get the GM of major venues to quote the correct number of aquatic centres.
Through the chair, we own 8 aquatic centres, and we operate 4. The other 4 are operated by a third party, and at this stage they accept cash to be the 4.
The question I have about that is, I would imagine, or can the officers tell me, that it would be council's intent to require them not to take cash if the new lease was granted, that it would be a cashless system that we would recommend to our providers, and it's perhaps that the leases were provided earlier that they have the ability to accept cash?
Through the chair, you are correct. At the moment they can do their own terms and conditions. It's something that we could negotiate in the next lease, 100%. What is worth noting is Miami is actually a third party. It's Upper Coomera that we do operate and run. Miami does accept cash, which is about 6%, and it's declining, which is operated by a third party.
Thank you.
Sorry, which only Miami accepts cash?
No, all 4 operated externally except cash. Yeah.
Okay. Just on Councillor Gates' point, though, her question was would we be recommending? Your answer was not that we'd be recommending, but that we could. It isn't common that we would normally recommend that our providers would reduce services to our ratepayers. Councillor Fowler?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to ask, where are we getting the $150,000 figure? I can see $250,000 for major sports venues and aquatics for fit out costs. So I was just wondering where we were getting the.
Where's the page that's got that?
Through the chair, so the 150,000 is not actually written into the report. The 250 estimated costs for major sports and aquatics was made up of what the aquatics and major sports venues in totality could cost. So on average for an aquatic centre, it could cost up to 150,000. So just as before, we mentioned that the newer locations could cost up to that much, whereas Gold Coast Aquatic Centre, which is an older facility, could cost quite a bit less. So it is an average figure. So once you're kind of looking at the average of a major sports venue versus an aquatic centre, it does vary. There's quite a range of smaller amount of fit out cost to larger amount of fit out cost.
A little confused. I may not have heard this correctly, but I thought before you said the ones that we are operating that are currently cashless are Gold Coast Aquatic, Pimpama, Palm Beach and Miami. But Miami is accepting cash. So how many are accepting cash? 4?
4 accept cash.
So what is the fourth one that is not accepting cash? We've got Pimpama, Palm Beach, Gold Coast Aquatic. Upper Coomera. And they wouldn't previously have been set up for receiving cash?
I believe they did
they are.
receive cash previously. The two that haven't.
Gold Coast Aquatic Centre and Coomera have accepted cash. So we would assume that the putting that back is going to be minimal for that. For the new ones, we don't know, but you're suggesting to put in a CCTV and cash room for them could be up to 150. Again, I'd like that contract if that's the case. Okay, cool. Councillor Wilkinson?
I wasn't sure if there was a question there, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Well, sorry, do you have a question?
I thought the General Manager of Venues was providing some information. I wasn't sure if you were asking a question. I couldn't understand whether you were making a statement or asking a question.
Do you have a question now?
No, I actually thought Mark was asked a question and then he didn't get a chance to answer. So I just...
No, we got it. Upper Coomera, Gold Coast Aquatic Centre.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just, again, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the change recommendation brought forward at this time, but I wanted to ask, and whether it's a question that's taken on notice perhaps, and it comes back to then the change recommendation before us, whether you'd consider some alterations. But if 6% cash is going through Pimpama, for instance, and those other ones, what do we have a figure as far as the percentage that's possibly going through those other, aquatic centres, those 4 that we've just noted before, the Upper Coomera, the Palm Beach, and I think the other one, I'm remissing me what the name of it was, Coomera? But so do we have an idea of the percentage going through those other ones? I noted Pimpama was 6%, but really I'm just trying to really ascertain the cost with actually, if we were to go and take this on board and go forward, how many, what's the purpose? Is it really, are we trying to appease a minority that seems to be now going downwards? I'm just trying to work out numbers wise if it even stacks up. And so then this comes back to the change recommendation, Chair, and I don't know again if you'd consider it, but whether it's investigated for those purposes to actually then come back to the council, because off of that, it basically means we're doing this by that particular point in time with point 2 there, where I just don't see it financially stacking up at this point in time because I don't have all the information.
Yep, fair enough. So I think there's 2 points with that. The first one is that, and Ms Farquhar could present us now the specifics on the aquatic centre proposed operational, because we do receive that information, so we can provide that. As to the decision on whether we do that or whether that financially steps up or why we would do that, that's not actually a question for the city, that's a question for us. And what I was starting on moving this recommendation, but I went to questions, and it is a really tricky one. If you were looking at this purely from a financial or a logistics perspective, you wouldn't probably do it. However, we are a local government and we are here to provide services to the community. So there is it is a significant impact on our community in terms of transitioning it to a cashless society if governments don't accept cash where people want to. The reason particularly for this recommendation is it just happened to be lucky and coincidental that where we get the most complaints from, aquatic centres, it actually isn't actually all that cost prohibitive for us to present that back. So that is why I do have that recommendation there. I would be open to considering reverting it to the Upper Coomera and Gold Coast Aquatic Centre and a further investigation on costs of Pimpava and Palm Beach if that's suitable. But first, Karen, if you could please just write out those explicit costs of operationally on the aquatic centres.
Through the chair, so the operational costs for cash float management per location would be $30,645 for an aquatic centre. Cash collections would cost $4,200 annually. So we're looking at a total of $34,845 operationally annually.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Councillor Tozer.
So, a question through you, Madam Chair, to Mark. You mentioned 6% of Miami's revenue is, or transactions are cash. What's the actual value?
Through the chair, I don't have that number on me, so I'll have to take that on notice.
Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
So we've been about 4 years, my understanding is now, that we've been cashless. So there's obviously a lot of users now that are still gaining access, I presume in most cases, using another method to provide that particular service. So
The vast majority are using an online cashless facility.
Yeah.
And that's why we looked at this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think,
Sorry, you've got...
I think I'm coming back to how many are actually saying that they can't provide a service. We can't use a service because we don't have other forms of paying.
Well, it's already been presented to us that they can't provide that information to us on notice right now. However, I would note that this had more handwritten signatures on it than any petition that the Chamber support staff can remember. And it is a small percentage, but this isn't a decision based on a pure financial lens. It is on a ideological lens, I suppose, as well, of whether us as a government, if we have a capacity and it's not going to cost us that much, do we enable pensioners to pay for their water aerobics class or for their son to buy an ice cream after their swimming lesson with cash? Councillor Gates.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Have we monitored the attendance at our aquatic centres, and has there been a decline in participation at the centres since we introduced cashless 4 years ago, or have our numbers remained pretty well the same or grown?
Through the chair, our visitations have probably increased about 10% on annum for the last 2 or 3 years.
That's
at all centres.
Thank you.
In line with our population. Okay, any other questions? So I am going to move this, and thank you, Councillor Martin, for seconding it. Having gone through the financial costs for us to ensure that our aquatic centres can handle cash with Ms. Farquhar, I see that it doesn't make a cost prohibitive circumstance. I do also see the value in aligning those services, and particularly given this was the greatest frustration of our residents, I'm glad that we can provide and we can support that. Again, in this, room. We are a board effectively, but we aren't a for-profit organisation, and there are things that we do need to consider which are of great benefit to the residents and users of our facilities. So that's me moving this. Do I have someone who wishes to speak against? Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. And I do this regretfully because I actually genuinely value the input of the 6,500 residents that submitted on this petition. However, the Australian Parliament has the exclusive power to make laws about currency, coinage and legal tender, as provided in the Constitution of Australia. I very much see that the fundamental principle that's underlying this petition is very much the responsibility of our federal colleagues, and I hope they're listening and they take note of the 6,500 petitioners. The role of this council, however, is to make fiscally responsible decisions on behalf of our ratepayers that fund the operations, and I'm not quite sure that 150,000 per facility plus ongoing costs of 34,000 represent that, and so I can't support the change recommendation.
Thank you. And I think I would like to just note that this isn't $150,000, and that has been confirmed that it's possibly a few $1,000s for Aquatic Centre for Gold Coast and for Upper Coomera, and we don't know, we haven't received the explicit. It was a very, very generous number in there. Regarding your point on Parliament, and forgive me for just speaking quickly on here, but since you raised that new point, I think that is fair. It is also important to recognise, which is not not sure whether it was in the report. We are one of only 3 councils in the country who have gone cashless on services. So the current legislation doesn't differ based on whether government services versus businesses, as we found out, but we are in the vast minority by not providing that government service. Sorry. I will take that as me speaking for, because I just did. Speaker against?
I'm not on the committee, thank you. I just want to highlight that we are the second largest local authority in the whole of the country, and we are at the forefront of being a progressive city. We've just been through a major restructure in our organisation to find efficiencies, and it's clear that this is one of them. I think we should be waiting for the outcome of the bill that's before the House of Representatives before we do anything. I just can't, and I will not support at full council the outcome that's been proposed today, because people almost always have a debit card now. I mean, a bank always issues a debit card, and we've heard the officers say that there's been an increase in visitation. It hasn't stopped people. I haven't had more than 1 or 2 complaints in 4 years about the Upper Coomera pool, because once it's not available, if you don't have cash, people find another way to pay. So I just want to voice my concern that we would add to the cost of running the city for 6% of the population who will find another way, in my view.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. We've just unveiled the best aquatic centre on the coast. Shameless plug here, just this week. Councillor O'Neill knows this. A brand new aquatic and community centre, and I think for me it's about these low cost items. We're not, it's sub $10 to go to the pool. So it's not talking about paying thousands in rates. And I think for me, I agree with the philosophy of a customer service business, and sometimes it's not all about efficiency. And perhaps, especially in the southern Gold Coast, that aquatic centre has warm water pools, and I think the elderly is in higher demand, and I think it's the elderly that are typically those retirees. I'm just fearful that we will make it less accessible, not more accessible, and I think until that we've got a federal decision, I'm just of the view I don't want to see the elderly take cash there, be turned away, especially where there's no post or anything, like they're getting back in their car and going somewhere else. So I think we can work on the actual cost of. So until there's a decision at a federal level, I think we should be more accessible, not less accessible, and that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. And
Speaking
again,
against.
Sorry.
Speaking against.
Oh, yeah,
Yep.
speaking against, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Look, I won't echo what both Councillor Curtis and Councillor Gates have both said, but I do agree with what they've said. I also would have appreciated that, given that some of the numbers that are getting thrown around this afternoon are numbers that I'm hearing for the first time, and this figure of $150,000 is just being wishy-washy. So, again, coming back to fiscal responsibility, I go, in my own personal view, that to me is not making a very informed choice. I'm kind of getting it at a whim. So I always feel a bit uncomfortable, I guess, in that respect. So I wanted to add that into the conversation, I guess, this afternoon. But additionally, we are speaking only specifically to those. There are still the avenues for other services where cash will still be accepted. This is something that I think is being a little bit neglected in the conversation today. It's not that it's completely dead. It's just to say that it's not continuing on in this capacity. So I think, given that I don't have all the information in front of me, I can't get on board with this particular change recommendation today. I would have loved us to go down the path of possibly further investigating and getting those hardline figures, but because of course, my position on that, I won't be supporting this one today.
Thank you very much. Speakers for? No? Okay. So I will close. I do appreciate that the specific figures of the major sports venues and aquatics were not separated and presented to this committee. So it doesn't present in the report. It doesn't present the modest cost that it would take for us to change our 4 aquatic centres to come up to speed to be like the other 4 that we have and accept cash. This is a strange one, I have to say, and normally I would be all about the efficiencies and cost savings overall to ratepayers. However, I do think that governments have a obligation, even if it isn't currently spelled out in federal legislation. I think that's more a matter of when that legislation was written than anything else. Sorry, we've taken questions now. So so I do think that the local government has an obligation to listen to its residents, and if there is a way for us to provide this service at a modest cost, we should be doing it. The other areas, and I do speak to the petitioners and say I appreciate they'd like to see cash across all areas, but that isn't financially viable for us to do that. There are very few places where you would make large payments these days where cash would be accepted, paying your electricity bill to whatever it may be, and you can pay your rates as it's been determined at CBA and Australia Post. But we are talking about those small matters. We're talking about the pensioner who has their cash that they go and take down, giving a child a few dollars that they can go and buy an ice cream. And I think it would be a generous position of this council to recognise a very modest cost when we have just signed off in the last council meeting for things like a significant investment entity which potentially could be investing hundreds of millions of dollars and be returning to this city tens of millions of dollars in interest per year, that a $30,000 operational is not significant. So with that, I will close and move that we accept this recommendation. All in favour? Thank you. All against? Thank you. So that is lost. What do we do now? Because we don't have a foreshadow. So what do we do? Okay. Okay. So I will propose a motion. I'll propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. No, I'd like to present. I'd just like to actually just work one out, see whether this works. Because Councillor Wilkinson, with your point of getting further detail, do you want to work on one?
Well, Chair, I'm happy to work with you on one. My point is that we keep hearing about the modest costs that you've just kept outlining. I don't know what that modest cost is. And so this is hence why I keep coming back to whether further investigation or even further detail could be presented to the councillors, perhaps before. It doesn't need to necessarily be today. It could be before full council, for instance. But this is where I wanted to try and get there before, because you keep, again, Chair, with your words, the modest. I don't know modest because I don't know the figures.
Okay.
So the Chair, Karen does have that information.
Yeah, and I believe that the $30,000 operational was provided. But Karen, if you'd like to speak to that further.
Yeah, through the chair. So I think we're referring to the fit out costs and them being a high level estimate and not really understanding the full detail behind that $150,000 estimate for a fit out. So there will be variability across those 4 aquatic centre sites, particularly in relation to the new aquatic centres that will need a full fit out. Other considerations for the older sites that used to accept cash is that the rooms that were purposed for cash counting have now been repurposed. So there will be an element of whether it is foregone revenue from hire of a room or whether there's some sort of additional fit out that needs to happen in that cash counting room.
Okay, so before we actually create a recommendation, if I can just get a sense, I suppose there's 2 ways we could take this. One is a recommendation that a report be brought back to council that does provide that specific information after further investigation on aquatic centres. The other alternative, so I just wondered, Councillor Wilkinson supports that. Just wanted to see what other support there'd be. Councillor Curtis? Yeah, okay. So, well, let's work on that. So that if we take off the 1 and say that a report be brought back to this committee after investigation of the specific costs of reintroducing cash services at our aquatic centres.
Will that element be added to that report?
Yeah, I just want to add one more.
I don't want to change the words. I just want to make sure that the report includes the information that Mark committed to about the quantum. What is 6% of Miami? So were we to introduce it, pay the capital and operational costs, what actual amount of cash is not a percentage, total value?
Okay. The other one I wouldn't mind putting in there, and I'll just see what people think, because I'm just not die on the wall over, but whether we do make a note to write to federal members in terms of their intent on government versus private business. Or we can just do that separately. I might just send them a letter myself. We don't need it to be in here. Find out what they're thinking. The report will be back to the Governance Committee following investigations into the costs of reintroducing cash payments at our aquatic centres. Okay. So I'm happy to move that unless you got Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair, again. And just, I know that we're now just singularly focusing, obviously, on the aquatic centres, but given the first, or what was originally going to be proposed as the recommendation today, also looked at the city's customer service centres, venues, libraries and facilities, at those 3 others, are we in a position that we're just saying that we're not.
Well, I
because this
think
is
if,
very-
if you have a look at the report, there is sufficient information about that already in the report. And if you look at page 20,
No,
it's just that it hasn't been separated between the major support centres and aquatics.
no,
I can't imagine that there would be support for, I mean, the cost seems quite prohibitive at customer service centres.
No, that's my point, though, Chair. Is that why don't we leave that in as a 1 and then have that number 2 with what you've just put out there? Because that then would actually, because like I said, the cost prohibiting aspects of the others. I just feel like this is now not even talking about them whatsoever. So can we resolve to keep them remain cashless? Is there a problem with that, or
no?
And I'm just putting it out for you for consideration.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So my apologies. So number 1, you're saying just put number 1 in, just take out aquatic centres. Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, I just didn't understand. So do you sorry, the one of the original recommendation, we'll add that at the top of the new motion. Just take out the word aquatic centres. So the first recommendation, number 1, that the city recommendation service centres, copy that, paste that as the new number 1. And remove aquatic centres. Thank you. And I'm well aware that you have the toughest job in this room. I'm glad I don't do that job. Right, yeah, so aquatic centre goes in 2. Okay, great. And 3. Okay. Councillor Martin.
Just on that report question through you, Chair, to Mark, on the report, where we're talking about drilling down those numbers, I'm sure you will, but can you please just make sure we're including, obviously the Palm Beach Aquatic Centre was closed for 2 years, so just take that into account, that if there's growth in other areas, that we're making sure that it's not just shifting from the southern facility.
Yeah, through the chair, we'll make sure we'll work through that. Yeah.
Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question for officers. So given that we've omitted aquatic centres from point 1, we essentially haven't made a determination or a recommendation for them yet. Is that okay to have that open-ended, not decided upon until this report comes back? Or should we be making the recommendation that they stay cashless until the report is received? Is it okay to have it open-ended, not decided on at this stage?
Yeah, it'd be fine if we didn't even have one. So we're making a positive statement now that we are going to remain. Do you want me to change the wording so instead of remain, it's like
just looking
permanently?
For a response from the officers.
I think you misunderstood. What Councillor Curtis is suggesting, that we add something that says, in the interim, the aquatic centres will remain cashless. And I think that was the intent of...
The omission of aquatic centres, I don't know what the consequences of that are, and I was seeking clarification from officers, and maybe we could include it.
Yep, that's a good point. I actually think it'd be simpler if we just took out number 1. I don't think we need it there. Because if we don't have it there, then we're just saying a report's coming back. So obviously they are all staying cashless for the moment, and a report's coming back about aquatic centres.
Oh, I thought that's the decision we were making today, whether they were staying cashless.
Correct.
No, we're making a decision on the petition. So if we don't put it in there, then it is cashless, right? Because it is all cashless at the moment. If we don't make a positive statement, then it stays. So, sorry, it's going to be simpler. We just take that one out. Just take that out and we'll go back to the original. Okay, thank you. So 1, 2. Okay, anything else? No. Okay, mover, seconder, Councillor Fowler?
No, sorry, I have none.
Another question?
Sorry, Chair. I do believe that we need one in, and we need to add aquatics as another word in there. Like, we actually do need that. And then the second step is that a report gets brought back in regards to aquatic centres. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Let's do it. So if we do put it in, that cities remain cashless.
No, leave it in.
Yeah. So the intention of that statement when it was first made by the officers was that they would be. Okay, yeah, I suppose it works. It was the intention was for it permanently to remain. It wasn't for like an interim remain. But yeah, it's fine. Let's do that. Remain cashless until a report is brought back. I think is better, because otherwise it's not sending the communication message about it. A report
Through the chair.
No, look. Okay, so this is my motion. It really does change the meaning if you put that sentence in without explicitly stating that we're going to bring back the aquatic centres review, because Councillor Taylor.
If we had a report coming back to full council and there was a change of recommendation to have aquatic centres use cash, wouldn't it be the discretion of the council at that particular time that would be able to change this current decision?
Yeah, that's right. So if we don't have that statement in there, nothing's changing. That's my point. What is the point of having that statement in there if nothing's changing? Yeah, no, so this I think it's actually misleading to the petitioner. By putting that in, they think, that everything's just going to stay the same. No, what we're doing is we're asking for a further report and then we're going to make a decision on it.
Chair, can I just suggest that you remove aquatic centres from number 1 and then expand number 2 to include, take out the report is brought back at number 1 as well, and expand number 2 to that aquatic centres remain cashless and that a report be brought back for further consideration.
That sounds good. So the aquatic centres bit will be first, right?
Yes, at the start of number 2.
At the start of 2?
Until cashless, and that a report be brought back following investigations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will remain cashless until a report will be brought back. Okay, we got there. Thank you very much. Okay, okay, moved, seconded. Seconded. People still reading it, sorry. Okay, so Councillor Wilkinson, are you seconding that? Okay, cool. Okay, I think we've spoken enough on it, so let's, we know where we're at, so I'll take a vote on that. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and thank you for getting us to that wording in the end. Okay, good stuff. Policy reviews, insurance report. Thank you. What's that one, sorry? The policy reviews, I'll have to pull that out. Oh, okay. Did anyone read them? Yeah. Yeah. Which one did you want? The graffiti one? The graffiti one where all the time frames have been removed for removal. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I don't know that that's the best outcome for our communities. Well, it'd be great to consider it at full council. Okay. Ms Cook.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. So it hasn't been too long since I was up here last time. However, we wanted to reschedule the annual report, so it's coming in at a more appropriate time, post-financial, end of financial year, and then we can talk about the year ahead. So I also will say this presentation and report hasn't been in open for a few years with the things that have been happening in the insurance space. So today in the presentation, I do apologise if it's a little bit of a repeat of what you have seen, but I thought it was worthwhile to provide a little bit of context for what a captive is, but I won't go on too much. Okay, so again, we actually have, and I will go back a slide, sorry, we have a mix in the city of insurance. So we have a mix of self-insurance, we have insurance via our captive, and we have reinsurance to protect the captive, and then we have direct insurance cover. Now, I'll talk about this more when I get to the slide of our current year's placements. So in terms of our captive, so this is a model that we've had for 17 years now, and we're well ahead of our time when we implemented this. What is a captive? Well, it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the city. It is located in Guernsey, managed by a captive manager, and has a board of directors and an audit and risk committee. So as I've provided updates to you previously this year, the captive underwent a comprehensive strategic review at the end of last year, where we delivered the results of that earlier in this year. So what it found out was that the captive is still fit for purpose for the city. It's a sophisticated risk management tool. It gives the city full ownership and control. We have greater flexibility with cover. We don't have issues in terms of capacity like the traditional market. And then we also have that benefit of direct access to the reinsurance market. Moving on to a bit of an update since I was here last time. Following the strategic review, we looked at enhancements for the captive and we looked at the governance of it. One big piece for me that stood out was aligning it to the city's enterprise risk framework. So I'm on the audit risk committee for the captive, and we went through at our last committee and aligned it to what the city has in place. For me, that was really important in terms of the risk matrix, and also so when I'm coming back to these environments, I'm talking the same talk, and we're also aligning so we have those risk mitigation controls in place as well. What has happened since last time? We undertook a stakeholder tender for both our captive manager and UK broker. This has been finalised and it actually resulted in 2 new appointments. So we have now appointed Aon Insurance Managers in Guernsey to be our captive manager, and our UK broker is now McGill and Partners. So we're in a stage at the moment of a 3-month transition between our old managers and brokers and our new ones. The exciting piece around this is future work that we can achieve, both aligning, and what I will say in terms of this tender, we made it crystal clear what we wanted out of the captive, and that was something that the strategic review really highlighted. We need to take control of this model. We're in a good, mature position because it has been in place for so long that for us it was timing on what do we want to use this for? How's it actually going to be the best tool for the city and for the community as well? So we aligned that when we went out to tender. And both of these stakeholders really met that, should I say. So in terms of they know what we want to achieve over the next 12 months to 3 years, and they're going to work really closely with us on that. So in terms of the continued growth of the captive, we're moving away from a product, and I know that's an interesting concept when we're talking insurance, but we're moving more into a service. And that for us as a city, we're moving from let's use this as a risk management tool. What are we doing? Can we start leading risk mitigation initiatives? What's the captive doing to give back to the city besides providing that underwriting and the insurance policies for us? So the next 12 months, we're going to be doing a lot in that space, partnering with our Chief Risk and Audit Office internally as well to say what areas of growth and risk mitigation initiatives do you have or would like to see, and we will take that back to the board and present that to that. Because at the end of the day, if they can be funding initiatives like this, it's going to better, one, serve our city and the community, but also strategically, it's going to drive down the cost of claims and the number of claims as well. So linking obviously all back to enhancing the Gold Coast way of life. And I say that because for us, it's not just looking at the city and what it's doing for us, it's what it's actually then can do for the community as well. this is our program placements. And I just thought visually this was a really good overview. I won't bore you and go through every class of insurance that we have, but it's just good to understand the cover and how we actually have that in our insurance program. So we have excesses, as everyone does with their insurances. Under that excess, we are self-insured. So we are well aware of what that looks like. And each class of insurance does have certain different excess amounts. But then, and the next one, the abbreviation is the City of Gold Coast Insurance Company Limited. That's our captive. We also have reinsurance of those major categories to protect that captive as well. And then we have direct placements. And what I mean, I'll just use industrial special risk as an example. That's our assets, that's our properties. So we look at that catastrophic layer that goes above and beyond what our reinsurances are, and we directly place those with the market. The most exciting part where we're heading into is the future work. So I touched on this before, but we're coming into a really exciting time. So we're just about to complete the end of our 3-year, multi-year program for our insurance setup right now. We will be working really closely with McGill and Partners as our new broker to look at what best we can get out of this program. What I say about that is we're going to do internally in the city a deep dive of our current assessment coverage, but also what's in the captive, what's out of the captive, what was the choice for that, what's our current risk profile, what makes good business sense, but also what is the appetite of the city, what is the appetite of the captive. That will all be considered when we're looking at that current state. Again, investigating all options. We are going to use the captive as a service more. So you will likely hear me come back and talk about more risk initiatives that the captive can be supporting the city on as well. As I said, we'll be partnering with the Chief Risk and Audit Office for that. And the last key one for me, and I've been talking to a lot of your officers lately, your division officers, one thing I do want to put a lot of work into is assisting you all with the questions and inquiries you get from your constituents. So they may have put a claim in, it may have been denied, or they may have an inquiry about one of our trees coming down on their fences. For us, absolutely, we're more than happy to answer all of that, but to provide you with the tools, we're going to do an information flyer, brochure, here's a quick, and also a link to our process. So for us, we've really formalised and focused on that in the last 12 months on what is the easiest point of contact or process for our customer, making it more online, making it more accessible, but also not them having to ring 10 different people, to 10 different parts of the city to find out what they need to do and what that process is. So for us, we will be coming out to talk with you all of what you would like to see. I have a bit of an idea of the questions that you get and the comments, but in terms of if we can provide some general advice of what could be considered a claim, there certainly would be no discussion about liability. But if we can just educate you and your officers, I think will greatly assist in terms of responding to the inquiries you get. As I say, that doesn't take away, you're certainly able to contact me directly. I'm also happy to come out and talk about certain matters and certain, inquiries that you get. And I definitely recommend that, especially if, you have a resident that may not understand that process. I'm happy to be a part of that as well. But that's what's happening in our space from an education and information. And that's me.
Well, thank you. And Ms. Cook, you're a woman after my own heart. I love your excitement and passion for insurance and the way that you communicate it, make it clear for us. Questions? Councillor Tozer.
I've had some queries just over the last... Hi, here you go. We've only seen each other on emails, so lovely to meet you. But through the chair, I've had some queries lately in relation to liability relating to contractors and how we transfer risk from the council to the contractor when a stone flicks up from a... help me understand whether there is a mechanism by which council can meet some of the costs when that sort of incident occurs, and whether we would choose or not choose to do that.
Through you, Chair. So these ones are common, and yes, you will receive a few of these. For us, we have discharged that. So in terms of when we engage contractors, they have their own liability insurance, and that's part of their contract. For us, we actually cannot get involved from an insurance aspect in terms of the response from the contractor. But what we're trying to do is really go back to that contract owner internally. Let's just say there was a certain contractor we had numerous complaints about or denials of claims. We will put that back to the contract owner to then review and have that discussion. However, from a city's point of view, and certainly from an insurance, we are unable to step in and provide that cover.
Okay, that clears it up. I've got a second question, if that's all right. The directors of the captive insurance company are 3 independent directors, and I think in the report it talks about the mayor being one, and then the CEO being one, and then Luke Wallace being one. And I had a question about in a mix of directors where 2 of the directors are otherwise subordinate to another director. Is there any advice we've sought in relation to that being a good model?
Yeah, look, through the chair, sorry. What I can say on that is we've actually looked at who actually has the appropriate skill set to be sitting on that board. So in terms of, yes, there are 3 local, and I say local in terms of Guernsey-based directors, and then they are 3 shareholder representatives. So myself, CEO, and Luke Wallace, yes. So and I will say I'm just new to the board, so in the last few months I was appointed. It really is looking at the skill set, to be honest, and what it brings. So when we're looking at our diversity of our board, we're really understanding the skills and experience of each of those that they bring to the role.
So if I may,
yes,
if I understand your question, it was more about if there's a conflict about these 2 having to, you said, what did you say, having to defer or report to one. Is that your concern, or it's about skill set?
I was just tuned into some independent advice, or not independent advice about that mix of directors. I'm interested in the skill set conversation that you were commenting on, but yeah.
Yeah.
You continue, please.
No, sorry. So it is absolutely, we are all equal directors on that board. So from a shareholder position, yes, there's 3 of us, but we all have the exact same role. And
yeah. So in the role of being the shareholder and representing the interests of the shareholder, it's complicated, I'm assuming, because you actually represent the interests as directors of that kind of company. You actually you represent the interests of that company, really, don't you? Not.
Yeah, absolutely, correct. So we sit on that board as board of directors for that insurance company, correct?
Yeah. So I'm conscious of that perception that one of the directors has the power to direct other directors, and that seems strange and uncommon. And my question, I think, is more specifically, is there examples of that in the corporate world that you could direct us to where we could have some certainty or reassurance that that's not only practical for us, but actually commonly undertaken?
100. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I was just about...
you can take
let
Ms.
Cook.
No, I
just wanted to say there are examples of it within our organisation. And Experience Gold Coast, Brown Gold Coast, Invest Gold Coast, but
I will say absolutely from a captive insurance model, it is very common, and I can bring back some other companies that will do that. It is very common for that to occur because as the parent company, you have representatives on that board, and really they want people in the room to sit on that board as board of director that, 1, have the skills and knowledge, but 2, can make the calls. But again, we're equal directors when we're on that board.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Louise. Just doubling back to the insurance claims made against our contractors. So you said we can't get involved, but you are interested in the feedback for our awareness. So I guess my question is, how do you obtain that feedback? And then what do you do with it once you've compiled it? And then does it ever come back to us in council?
So look, through you, Chair, what I can respond to is what we see come through our branch. So when we get all of those inquiries, we forward it straight through to the relevant contract owner. So I'll give an example. Mowing contractors. We get a lot of those. Yes, the stone has come up and hit my car. And of course, they will come to council first, most likely. And we will point them into the right direction of that is a contractor and here are their details, and you can go down that path. But for us, it's collating that feedback and giving it back to our internal contract owner for them to review.
Sorry, Chair. So I think it's the step after that I'm interested in. So they've gone through the contractor, they've not admitted liability, and then the ratepayers left feeling pretty hard done by. Is there an avenue for us to get that information back to you, and then can that be used in the future for our awareness?
So through you, Chair, what I would do, and I can take that on notice, it is in a different area, so I'm unsure of what that process is because there are numerous and various contract owners internally to the city, but I certainly can find out for you and then bring that back. Thanks.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Quick question on a claim that is paid out. I'm just interested if that, by paying a claim, liability is accepted, or when claims are paid, there can be a settlement. We admit no liability, but we're settling this claim. I'm just interested in, is there a reluctance at times, be it through our insurance or contractors, to not pay because that then is implied liability?
Through you, Chair. So, yes, in terms of the insurance, and it's certainly dependent on the policy. So each class of insurance has a different policy, but in terms of what the contractor's insurance would hold, that would be absolutely dependent on what their policy is. But what I will say is if there's no admission of liability, therefore the claim isn't substantiated. So it comes down to liability.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone wish to move that? Councillor Martin, seconded Councillor Fowler. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Martin?
Just thank you for making it upbeat and exciting, given the relatively dry content.
Okay, if there's no one who's urgently wishes to speak to it, we'll just take a vote on that. Thank you. All in favour? Great. I understand there's no general business, so I will close the meeting at 2:56. Thank you.